as a herbal practitioner, if I'm working with somebody's gut microbiome, I normally introduce inflammation first before introducing prebiotics.
Are you talking about IBS or maybe more severe inflammatory conditions?
Probably IBS, because I see that more than IBD.
Okay.
But does the balanced soil reduce the inflammation?
Yes.
Okay.
In the small intestine, really. In the large intestine, you have to think of the anatomical structure of the gut. So what you might think of the inner layer in three-dimensional terms is actually the outer layer. So the microvilli are the outer layer that's exposed to the external environment. It's the inner layers where, if you take balanced soil, you'll reduce chronic inflammatory stress in the inner layers. And if someone who has IBD, I recommend you do that first before introducing the prebiotic, which will then be acting from the other side. But start off by calming as much of the inflammation as you can. Otherwise, you may end up with an abreaction to the prebiotic fibers, because even although you have an unhealthy microbiome or microbiota in cases of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, it's kind of balancing out. You've reached a form of homeostasis, which isn't a good one, but it's still sort of in balance. If you disrupt that, you can precipitate a crisis. So I would say start with the anti-inflammatory treatment first, balance oil for maybe 3, maybe 4 months, and then gradually introduce the fibers, the prebiotic fibers, in a stepwise manner. But obviously very cautiously in cases of IBD.
And with IBS, it's fine to do the two together?
I don't know if I could, I don't think I could be as clear with IBS. You may be able to get away with using the two together. And I think it depends on the individual. I would generally tend to use the anti-inflammatory strategy first.
Because the other part of that same question was that the liver, the bile acids also control the gut microbiome. So does the balanced soil reduce inflammation in the liver to help that function better?
Oh yeah. So particularly if you've got patients who've got MSLD or who've progressed to steatosis, then you'd use both. So the balanced soil is reducing chronic inflammatory stress within the liver, but you really need to switch off the endotoxemia, which is driving the liver disease in the gut. So in that situation, I would probably start with both at the same time. There's other things too. The classical herbal treatments include it's horse chestnut, isn't it? The extract. There's various other herbal extracts which contain polyphenols, which are recycled through the liver, which I think are worth looking at. Lecithin, I think, is important too. The liver is very heavily membrane, and if you're instructing it or creating an environment which is permissive for liver regeneration, then supplying phosphatidylate phospholipids, I think, is a good thing to add to that.
Thank you. So the other
Sorry, it's not horse chestnut, is it? I'm blanked out.
It's not
No, it's not.
Thank you. And the nice thing about that particular polyphenol is it goes through the enterohepatic recycling, so it hits the liver again. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so what about vegetarians, especially you talked about Victorian times? So I'm concerned about the high levels of omega-3 and taking it long term, but with vegetarians in mind, because they would never have had those levels of omega-3.
But if you're a vegetarian, first of all, I feel very sorry for you. but secondly, am I being insufferably patronizing? Would you tell me right now? I think if you're eating a vegetarian diet and you're not eating ultra-processed vegetarian products, and there are so many of those now, it's very likely that you're consuming LA and ALA in a ratio that's below 5 to 1. And providing you keep that ratio below 4 or 5 to 1, then the algases and desaturases, which you use to convert both of those paired essential fatty acids, will do the right thing. And they'll give you the right balance of the polyunsaturated fatty acids, 6s and 3s further downstream. If you're a vegetarian and you're eating a lot of the ultra-processed vegetarian foods, you're going to be in trouble because in those products, the LA-ALA ratio is way pushed over in the wrong place. And your
Okay, we'll do 2 questions.
Hi, thank you. Because of the way fish is farmed, etc., and processed, in your view, what would you consider to be oily fish? Because I struggle, even though the books and statistics they say that this is oily fish, we just eat oily fish. But I'm like, well, what is oily fish?
That's a good question. And we know that the nutritional composition of farmed salmon is not exactly the same as the wild salmon. If you want an untampered original live fish, sardines are a good place to start. Biltons, Manhattan, if you can get them, all good. The problem is, the larger problem is there aren't enough fish in the sea to supply all the omega-3s that we would need to maintain a healthy population. And large areas are overfished already. Which I think means we have to cut out the fish altogether and go to the algae. Because it's the algae that produce the omega-3s and the polyphenols at the base of the marine food chains that then percolate through the krill, the larger fish bring and end up in the apex predator, which could be a killer whale, well, it could be your grandmother sitting down to a dish of rolls. So we have, I think, to go to the algae. It started off with wild harvesting, which is a problem, because that's the bottom of the food chain, and we really want to starve everything else that grows off of that. And it's now moved on to algal biofermenters, which are fully enclosed, so no contamination. You're infinitely upscalable. They also bind carbon. They're carbon safe. You think that's important? There are companies now that are growing these algae in these continuous production models in brownfield sites, so you're not using up agricultural land. It's environmentally extremely sound, and they produce reliably very large continuous quantities of omega-3s and polyphenols, and you don't need to send trawler fleets out to sea and pillage the fish stocks. This is the way forward. Plus, of course, it's vegan.
Without talking enough about the xeno gene, could you highlight the benefit of the xeno gene and what is a safe age group to start taking the xeno gene, please?
Well, xenogene has got me into a lot of trouble. The pharmaceutical industry don't like it at all because they think xenolytics is an area where they want to be and they think they can make a lot of money out of it. And we know that if you treat aged animals with xenolytics, you see a remarkable rejuvenation. Until recently, I don't think we could make practically usable xenolytics because many of the active compounds, there's 1 or 2 alkaloids, but the most of the polyphenols that we know about, the bioavailability isn't great. And to get levels in the tissues where senolysis takes place, it's absolutely very difficult to do. Now, a good friend of mine runs a company in Australia where they use some very interesting technologies to increase the bioavailability of a whole range of natural molecules. And they produced, it's a technology called liposperse. And they have a form of curcumin, which you take it and you put it into water, it dissolves almost instantly in water. The bioavailability is very, very high. And I was able to get hold of a kind of exclusivity, sort of, for the channel that we work in. So that was put into xenogene. And if you take it as directed, which is 4 tablets altogether, it's a big, big dose, it all goes into the blood, and we know that it reaches tissue levels where senolysis takes place. So you're knocking out some, probably not all, senescent cells. Senescent cells they accumulate as you get older. Probably not a good thing because they create a vicious biochemical metabolic cycle in the tissues where they grow and they accelerate the aging process. There's good at getting rid of them. We know that this particular polyphenol, presented in this way, as I said, achieves levels in the tissues high enough to kill senescent cells of some types, not all types. The point of adding the fucoides to this was, well, if you're knocking out all these dysfunctional cells in your different tissues, wouldn't it be stem cells, because to do that, you have to go to the lab, you give a sample of tissue, they'll grow it, and then they inject the stem cells back into it. It's invasive, it's expensive, it's personalized, and I think that nutrition should be available on a population level. So I had read some papers which suggested that the coidads were able to dislodge stem cells, which is not surprising because they're a little bit like Teflon. They're able to unstick cells and tissues if you take enough of them. And so I added some few coidads to the xenogene in the hope that this would dislodge stem cells from your bone marrow. As you get older, they get lazier. They reside in the bone marrow of your long bones, such as the femur. As you get older, the cells get lazier. It takes more and more to displace them, which is ironic because when you're older, you need them most. So I thought, well, if we just take them out with a few coidads, we would achieve some repopulation. Once they've been released from their bunkers and in the circulation, they will go to where they should be. They will scent, they will smell, literally, where the sites of damage are, and go repair them. So that was the basis for xenogene. I wasn't sure when I came up with the formulation how effective it would be. And I personally don't think that it's very relevant to people below the age of 50, because below the age of 50 usually we don't have very many senescent cells. But if you're 50, 55 or above, and you start noticing that things are starting to run down, then I think, of course, the xenogene might be helpful. I've taken a couple of courses over the years. I've noticed, some types of improvement. My own case is not particularly spectacular because I've been taking the health protocol for a long time. I was in reasonable shape, but I've heard from other people who've used xenogene who've seen quite remarkable recoveries from different conditions and from injuries, from disabling injuries. I don't yet know exactly everything that it's capable of. We're still monitoring the situation. I'm still watching it with great interest.
Okay, this will be the last question for today.
What causes the skin to itch and coughing when taking both the fish oil as well as the vegan oil? And how do you go around that?
The sound quality up here is not very good. You said something about skin quality.
No, skin itch.
Skin
Oh,
itch
skin itch.
and coughing.
Okay. Well, if there is an inflammatory component, and not all cases of itch involve a strong inflammatory component. If there is an inflammatory component, then any form of balance oil should have to reduce it. We see many people with different skin conditions, inflammatory skin conditions, who respond very well. The pruritus may be caused by other compounds. If any of you have dogs that scratch too much, Apical, if that's not, which works very well in terms of alleviating the itch, that's not really a predominantly inflammatory mechanism. There's various compounds that are formed in the body which produce itch. And they're not necessarily very much inflammation. So if your itch is of that type, then balance oil